Okay, so we're going to learn about compositing, about using some 2D animation and 2D images and putting a 3D animation into that scene. So here's a very short version of what we're going to do. Have it play from the beginning. So there's a foreground and a background, and I've broken up the layers in Photoshop, and then I've created a 3D spaceship that moves in between those layers and then added some effects in After Effects. So we're going to start in Photoshop, and you can just download a copyright royalty-free image from Pixabay or any other royalty copyright-free site that you like, and you can really do anything for your background. You also have the option here to use a two-dimensional video for your background. You can download free videos from Pixabay as well, and I won't show you how to do the masking in this tutorial, but in the class Canvas page I will link to a tutorial that does show you how to mask in Canvas, so you can do this similar technique with an actual video. So the most important thing is that you're going to the free download and make sure you get the 1920 by 1080 size. Same with the photos, you want to get a 1920. Here's the one I picked, which was just on the first page. Make sure you get the correct size. That'll just make your life easier. I'm going to come to File, Open. You can drag your file in however you want, and I'm taking my JPEG image, and mine is already 1920 by 1080, but if yours wasn't, you can come to the Crop tool here on the left, and you can come into Width and Height Resolution, and you can type 1920, and I'm pressing Tab, 1080. And then it will allow you to crop it in that way. And actually, for some reason, mine wasn't 1920 by 1080. Maybe I downloaded the wrong one, so this was good that I did that. So I'm gonna move this around and get it set up how I want it to be set up. And then you just either double click or press Enter to keep the crop. And now we have it set up, and this is going to make our life easier. So don't skip that step. Remember to set it up. So you're creating at least 2 layers. You can, of course, make a lot of layers, but at least 2. And your 3D object is going to move in between. So before you start doing this, really plan out your idea, find the right image. You can always use an image or photograph that you've taken yourself. That's kind of the best way to go. But really think about what kind of object you're going to create and how you want it moving. So I know I want a spaceship, and I want the spaceship coming from behind this hill and then moving forward. So I need to separate this foreground of the mountain here with the background. So we do that just with the quick selection. If you don't see the quick selection, you might be on the magic wand tool. You can just right click and get the quick selection. And to use the quick selection, you just drag. You can do more advanced masking if you're a Photoshop person. I am also going to put a link to another tutorial on how to do complex masking. Like this would be good if you had some hair or some tree branches that were really thin. You can do this using the channels. So I will put a link to how to do that, but I won't go over that in this tutorial. That's just an option if you want to do something more complicated. So I'm back in here with the quick selection tool. You can zoom in with the Control+, and you can make your brush bigger and smaller, just like any other paintbrush, with the left bracket to become smaller, and you can add to your selection. If you've gone over too much, you hold the Alt key and see how it turns into a negative, and you can just take it back. So then I release the Alt key and I can add to my selection, and I can hold the Alt key and it turns negative, and I can take stuff away. So really take your time, zoom in, get this looking good. If you do have a more complicated image to mask out, then I would use that channels option in the link that I'm going to provide for you. Okay, so once you have your selection, and if you have something more complicated, you can also do an inverse selection. Like I could have, if I selected the sky, I could come up to select and I can inverse my selection. Now it's selected on the sky. but I'm gonna actually Control Z and go back. So I have this mountain area selected, and I just wanna right click, and I want to layer via copy. Layer via copy. And this is gonna make a new layer from that selection. So I can turn the eye off here. Actually wanna unlock my background layer. Just press OK. I just double clicked on the lock and pressed OK. So I want to keep the sky in the background. So I'm going to call this background, which has everything in it. And then I want to call this, just double click and rename it foreground. So you want at least 2 layers, a background and a foreground. And my ship that I create in Modeler in Lightwave is going to go this way. Okay, so that's all you need to do. What's really important is that you want to save it as a Photoshop file. So I'm just going to do Control S to save, and I want to make sure my file type is Photoshop PSD, and I think I need to rename it. Okay, so make sure you save the Photoshop file. So the PSD file, because we want to retain those layers. We're going to bring it into After Effects after we work in Lightwave. And when you bring it in the Photoshop file into After Effects, it will keep the layers for you, so you don't have to break it up again. Okay, so I'm coming into layout because you're going to build I'm not going to go over how to build the model. You can make any kind of model you want for this. You can have any kind of objects. Everybody is going to be different. I just did a very simple spaceship, but you can really make whatever you want. So you build your model in Modeler, then you come to layout. I'm going to load the object. And so here's my spaceship, and I'm coming into my camera view, and I want to see the background that I created, the waterfall photo that I'm using, so I can kind of start to set up my animation here. We're gonna set up the animation steps here. We're gonna make an animation path, and then we're going to render just the spaceship and bring that into After Effects. And then in After Effects is when we're going to have it go behind the foreground layer, behind the mountain. So in here, we're just setting up the path of the animation. So I'm gonna make sure to come to Camera, Properties, make sure to make it HD, 1920 by 1080. And then to see the photo in the background, I come to Backdrop, and I'm going to the Compositing tab. And right here it says Background Image. We can load image, and you can find what you need. And I'm gonna take the PSD file because that is the one that I edited down to the correct size. So I wanna make sure it's the one that's 1920 by 1080 so it just fits in there perfectly. So my original file, I thought I had downloaded the correct size, but I obviously didn't when I went to crop. So make sure you get the right size image in. So whatever you cropped, the PSD file, open that. And we can see that in the background. It's going to fit exactly in. Now I'm in my camera and I'm pressing T. I'm in my move tool, and when I move around, the background image doesn't move. It's just like projection. So the camera setup, the background will not move with the camera. Okay, so we're just moving the object, and we're not animating the camera or anything. We're just animating the object. One important thing is that when you're in perspective view, you don't see the background. You only see that background in camera view. So a way so that you can be looking at the background and also editing your animation is this last arrow here, the third arrow up at the top. You can come to viewport layout, and you can come to double vertical. I think this is really helpful. And then you can have your perspective view and different views here in the second window, and in the left side you can see the backdrop and how that looks. When yours is going to be 14 seconds, or whatever it says in Canvas, which I believe is 14 seconds. So 14 times 30 frames per second is 420. So you would type in here 420. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm leaving it short just so it's faster. Okay, so we're going to create a motion path. We're going to create a path that our object is moving along. So think about how you want your motion path to be set up. We're just setting up a basic path to start, and then we're going to edit it after we put the keyframes in. So I'm going to do three keyframes. One at the very beginning, one sort of in the middle where it's going to curve, and then a third one where it will end. So I have my time indicator at 0. I'm going to click on my object, and I'm going to move it. I'm actually going to come to the top view here. I'm going to move it so I have it set up. Now I know I want my ship to start behind this mountain. And again, we don't have the layer set up here, so I'm just going to envision that it's behind the mountain, but we're still going to see it the whole time. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit because I really want it to look like it's pretty far back. And then I'm going to get it in the right place. Oops. Pull it down. So you're just adjusting it. That's with T. And then I'm going to go to Y, the rotate tool. And I'm going to get it just set up exactly how I want it to look. And you can obviously spend a lot more time with yours. So get yours set up. Rotate is Y, T is move. And then I'm also, it's pretty far back. I'm also going to make it a little smaller because I think it needs to be smaller. So I'm just coming to modify and size. And I'm just gonna make it a little tiny. And then I need to come back into my move, my T, and really get it set up in the right spot. So take your time, get it set up where you want the animation to start. And then I'm gonna move my time indicator somewhere along the middle. And then I am going to move it where I kind of want it to start curving forward. So I want it to come up over the mountain and then start coming forward. So move it forward just a little bit. And then you can make as many keyframes as you want, but I'm going to come to the end and have it where I want it to end up. So I want it to be really close here, like it's flying towards the camera in a kind of dramatic way. To make it more dramatic, I could even have it make it bigger with the size. And maybe it goes off the screen by the end. So you can play and see how that looks. And maybe that's too slow, but I think it looks pretty good. I'm gonna also come to the end and rotate it. So you could also be rotating this. So I'm gonna press Y. I'm gonna have it, let's see how that looks. Yeah, so it can rotate like it's moving towards us. Maybe I want to even rotate it more. Anyway, you can spend a lot of time getting yours looking great. Just keep testing it and making keyframes. And now that we have the motion path, now in mine, I'm in my top view, and you probably can't see this whole line. That's because I've changed a setting here. So to get that line visible, what you need to do is go to File, which is on the top, Edit, Open GL Options. This big thing comes up. All you need to change here, I'll show you, I think it's usually the default is at 60. So I'll show you what that looks like. You only see the motion path is going to kind of move with the object, and you don't see the entire motion path the entire time. So what you need to do here is type in the number of frames in your timeline. So for you it would be 420 if you're doing 14 seconds, tab 420. For me, you know, mine only goes to 120, so I really only need to do 120, but just type in the number of frames, whatever number is here, in both the motion path pre-frames and motion path post-frames. And this will allow you to see the entire path the entire time. And we can edit the path. One thing before I go any further, sometimes if you do have an extreme sort of close-up view of your object, it can look like it's breaking, or it can look like we're going inside of the object, which you don't want. So a way to fix that is you're clicked on the object, you're selected on the object, and you press the letter D, press D on the keyboard, and on the display here, so we're in display, the preferences display, you want to check the fixed near clip distance. So here it is, fixed near clip distance. So sometimes it's called clipping, sometimes your model might get broken up. It's not happening to mine right now, but if your model looks broken because you're zoomed in so far, all you do is check this box. The default 100 millimeters should be good. So that would fix that. Okay, so now we're going to continue to edit this motion path. So I can see my whole motion path, and we can edit it with a couple things over here. So we're in Modify, the Modify tab, and we can see there's a whole motion path section. So the first one is Move Path. We can move the whole path here, move everything. So you can make it closer. Just be careful, because if I make it closer, yeah, the size changes. So you can really edit it a lot that way. And then the path tool, so this is similar to Illustrator. So you can just click on these, each one is a keyframe. Let me get down here. So each one that has, right now we see the blue and red is a keyframe. So you can adjust each of these keyframes. And the thing about this is that it depends on which view you're in. So here in the top view, I see the blue and the red lines. The blue is the Z-axis, so that's the three-dimensional axis. The red is the X-axis. And then if we let's come into front, we can see we have a green one here too. The green is the Y-axis. So you kind of have to move change your view. The only view you can see all three axes is in perspective. So you might want to be in perspective and just be grabbing these and moving them around. So you can add a lot more keyframes. Let's say I want to have it move again up here. So I'm just moving my time indicator, and I want to create a keyframe. So I come down here below my timeline, I go create key. Nothing happens. That's because it doesn't let you create a keyframe when you're in the path tool. So I have to get out of the path tool. But the path tool is a little annoying because when I click on it, it doesn't get out of it. It wants me to press the space bar. So just press the space bar. Now the path tool is not highlighted, and I can create a key. This is going to pop up when I press the Create Key button. The important thing here is that you don't really touch anything. You leave the defaults because you want all of these keyframes. When it's highlighted in blue, it means there's a keyframe. So you don't want to click on rotation and have those grayed out. You want them all blue. You just press OK. And let me come to the top view. And now you have another keyframe that you can edit. I can come back to the path tool and edit that keyframe however I want. You can make it a more dramatic curve. You can really change this a lot. So you can create and add keyframes. You can delete keys. Again, you have to get out of the path tool by pressing the space bar, and then or move your time indicator to that specific key so it's lined up. And you can see the little arrow on top of the time indicator turns yellow when I line it up with the keyframe, and then you can delete that key at 79 and just press OK to delete. So I'm going to hit cancel because I want to keep that one. So take your time and get, move and rotate your object, get your path set up really nicely, and add as many keyframes as you want. Okay, and then make sure to keep playing and testing it and making sure it looks great. You're going to need to add some lighting and some textures, obviously. So I'm not going to go over how to do that because we've done that a lot before. So add new lights if you need to add lights. Think about where the light in your scene is. Don't animate the light like I just did. So get your time frame indicator back to 0 and then move your lights around to make sure that your object is lit throughout the scene. You can have the light animating if it makes sense for your scene, but what you want to think about is where the light is coming from in your photo or the video that you're using. And in mine, it's over here, so I definitely want to have my light shining from over here. And I'm gonna play around with textures, get everything in there the way I want it to look. The important thing that we're gonna do here is rendering it properly. So get your texture set up, get your lights looking great, make sure your object is visible the whole time, and then we are going to go to render, render properties. We're gonna uncheck enable GI, and you can of course be in VPR to see. And then we need to, I only want the ship, right? You only want your object because we're gonna set up everything else in After Effects and do that there. So I wanna get rid of this background. So I'm coming to backdrop, I'm coming into compositing, and I'm making this none. So my background image is none. Then I wanna come back into backdrop and do no gradient, because remember when we rendered it with that gradient, you actually see the gradient. So I just want it black. I want to see only the ship. And the PNG file format is for transparency. So it will give us just the ship with a transparent background. So once you have everything set up, you come into the output tab, and we're going to use PNG 32 for this one. So it's Lightwave LW underscore PNG 32. And we want to make sure the alpha is the transparency. So you want to make sure alpha says pre-multiplied. Okay, so that's going to allow us to have that transparent background, just the ship is going to render out. And then remember, you can uncheck this, make sure your render is in the right place, in the right folder, press cancel, and then you render it. You render scene. So once you get this all set up, Lightwave PNG 32, make sure alpha is at pre-multiplied so we get that transparency in the background, and then you render scene. Just press yes and let that go. Okay, so this is Adobe After Effects. It's a 2D animation program. It's what we're going to use for compositing and post-processing. To find it, you can just come to the search and type in After, and I'm using After Effects 2018, but for this, most versions should work. So you're just creating a new project, and we're going to import the Photoshop file. So I'm going to go to File, Import, File. I'm going to find my Photoshop file, my PSD file, right? Because that has the layers that I created. I'm going to press Import, and for this, it's important to pick Composition. You don't want footage, you want composition for this. So import kind is composition. You can leave that and press OK. Okay, so I realized I had imported the wrong photo, the one that wasn't cropped. So it's really important to check. I'm here in my project window and I'm clicked on my composition, and I'm checking that it's 1920 by 1080, and then I can come and see my layers here, and I can check right here, they say 1920 by 1080, both of them. So again, having the size set up is going to be really helpful because we had the camera in layout as 1920 by 1080, so everything is at the same size. Okay, so to get this composition into the timeline, all we have to do is double click on the icon next to the composition file type. So I'm just double clicking here, and then it automatically brings it into the timeline. It's the correct size and everything. What I want to do is set up the time, the duration of the animation. So I'm coming to Composition, Composition Settings, and we see it's 1920 by 1080, that looks good. And this is the duration. So I had made mine 14 because I did this project before, but we have the first 0 is the hours, the second one is the minutes, and then the third set of numbers is the seconds. So yours is going to be 14 seconds, so you want yours to look like this. And then the last one is the frames. So make sure it's 14 seconds, press OK. Also, if yours had started at just like 4 seconds and you made it longer, you can zoom in and out here with these little mountain icons, but this blue box here, this blue bracket is what will actually render. So if it's only 2 seconds, it's only going to render these 2 seconds. So if you save this project and you're like, I did all 14 seconds, but it didn't render, it's because you need to click on this blue bracket here and drag it all the way to the end so that it renders the entire scene. When you see this green arrow, it means that it's rendered. When you see this green line, it means that it's rendered. Okay, now we're going to import the light wave renders. So I'm going to come to File, Import, File. I'm going to find the renders folder. Here's my renders. And same thing, we want to make sure that PNG sequence is checked, same thing as before. So go to Import. And we can see it imported here in the final renders. We can check in the project. We can see that it's 1920 by 1080. You always want to be checking the size. And I only rendered 120 frames. So it says from 0 to 120. Yours will say 0 to 420 for 14 seconds. So what I can do now is I can take this final render, I can take the icon, I'm clicking on it with the left click and dragging it in between the two layers. And see that blue line shows up, so I can pick where I want to place this layer. And I want to place it in the middle of the foreground and the background. So the foreground is on the top, the background is on the bottom, and my Lightwave file is in the middle. So what happened with mine, and if you follow all the steps and get your setup, this shouldn't happen, but I think I was playing around with file sizes and I kind of messed mine up. If this happens, you can zoom out a little bit, so I can just like zoom out. And I'm locking the foreground and the background layers, so I'm just clicked on the spaceship and take the corner and increase the size and make sure I get it behind that mountain there. What I want to make sure of too is that the top can just take the corner, make it bigger. I want to make sure the top is lined up or it's going to look like it's cut off. Okay, so let's see how that looks. I can come back here and go to Fit, and you can just press the space bar to play. Now the first time it might look a little choppy because it has to turn green for it to render. So you might press the space bar twice. I'm actually going to bring mine shorter so it doesn't render out the whole thing every time. Okay, so that is still getting, see how it's still getting stuck behind the foreground? So we want to break it up so that the spaceship goes in front of this part. So in the beginning it looks okay, it's in the right placement, but towards right around here, I want to break it up. So what I need to do is come into this foreground layer, and all I'm doing is I'm taking the bar on the foreground layer and I'm clicking and dragging. Oh, it's locked. I have to unlock it. So I'm unlocking it and I'm just clicking and dragging and making this smaller, and it'll kind of snap to my marker. And now the ship will go in front of it. So because I kept the sky in the background of my image, the sky will be revealed, and it won't even, when this layer stops, right? Essentially we're stopping this layer here, we're cutting the foreground layer off here. We don't notice anything happening because it's the same image in the background, so it's seamless. So you're just gonna get yours set up and get it looking great. So I do have a link to a video. This is how to mask in After Effects if you want to use a video instead of a still image for the background, and it shows you step by step about how to create a moving image with a mask in it. So if you want to challenge yourself and do that, you can. That is completely optional, and that link to the tutorial is in the Canvas project. So if you wanted, like, I think it would make sense if the waterfall was moving or something more interesting was happening, you could definitely do that here, and you're just stacking the layers in the same way. So yours is going to be a lot longer. you're going to have some interesting things happening. The important thing is that you adjust the layers so that we can see everything we want to see. Okay, so we're going to add like a vintage overlay. You can really add anything that makes sense for your project. And you know, in Pixabay, there's tons of videos, and so you can look at, you know, you can find some interesting stuff to overlay. I picked this Super 8 overlay to give it a vintage look. There's smoke, there's all kinds of things that you can mess around with. The important thing is that you're downloading the correct size, 1920 by 1080. So get that downloaded, and then we bring it into After Effects. So File, Import, File, and I think here it is, my Super 8. Bringing it in, it comes in here, and I'm dragging it to the top because I want it over everything, but then it blocks it, which is not what I want. So what I have to do is give it a blending mode. I have my mode turned on here, but you probably can't see that. So in order to get this option, I'm just putting my, you'll see the parent option, that should be visible by default. So I'm just putting my cursor over here, I'm right clicking, I'm going to columns, and I'm making sure modes is checked. I can uncheck it. So this is probably what yours looks like now. So I'm just right clicking, columns, going to modes. And then I want to pick, this is like in Photoshop, the blending modes. I want to pick multiply. So it gives it a nice effect. I'm going to press play, and you can see that green arrow, the green line is working, showing that it's rendering. So that looks pretty good, but I can keep on adding more to it. If you toggle this open on the layer, and then the transform options, you can play with the opacity. You can make it a little more opaque so we can see the edges here. You can play around with that if that interests you. There's also a lot of effects built into After Effects. I'm just in the default workspace, and then here we see the effects and presets. And there's a ton of stuff. One that if you're doing a vintagey look, it really depends on your style, but noise and grain. I can take this dust and scratches, I'm just clicking on this icon, and I'm dragging it into the overlay, the Super 8 overlay I made. And then when I open it up here, I can see that there's an effects tab, so these effects were added. And I can see dust and scratches is there. So you can adjust all kinds of things for that. Open it up and you can see the opacity. So I'm just kind of opening up all of these options in that layer to adjust it. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to press the space bar to play. Sometimes it takes a minute to show up. So let's see. And it's really subtle, but you can see some dusty, scratchy things there. If the overlay that you brought in to After Effects isn't long enough, you can click on that and you can just drag out. You can make it longer, or you can drag it out to make it longer or shorter, or you can just drag another copy of it from the project. So I can click on this and make it shorter or longer, or you can just drag out another copy right next to it on the same layer or on a new layer, so it just plays over and over again like in a loop. But if that happens to you, I can also help you in class. Okay, so I'm going to add a sepia tone as another layer on top of it just to give it a more of a vintage look. So I'm in my timeline here where all my layers are, and I'm right clicking. I'm going to New, Solid, and I'm going to pick, I already had it picked, but I'm picking this kind of orangey, brownishy, yellow sepia tone. Press OK. And I want it at the top. If I didn't have it at the top, I could just click and drag it to make the layer the correct order. But I have it at the top. I'm going to change the blending mode. Sometimes screen, you can really play around. Screen can look good. You can also try, whoops, not that. Soft light is nice. So with the blending mode, it's mixing with the actual image in the background. So it's not just an overlay, it's actually mixing with it. So I'm going to open this up, open up my sepia toned solid, And I'm just going to turn the opacity down because I don't think I need that much. It could just be a subtle thing. So I want you to try adding at least 2 layers of some effects here in After Effects, and making it look a little more, you know, giving it a little something extra. And I think with these kind of overlays and the blending modes, it also blends in the 3D object that you've created a lot better with the scene, so it doesn't look so disjointed. So if you get the right lighting in Lightwave, and if you add some effects in After Effects, it can really blend the 3D with the 2D and make it look awesome. So the last thing we're going to do is add some music. So you can download copyright royalty-free music, import file. I have an MP3 here that I downloaded. You can import, and then you can just drag it in. I usually put it at the bottom. And we can add some keyframes in here to fade it in and out. So right now it's all the same. It's all the same, let me make it louder. It's all the same volume. And if I want to fade it in, you can also do your audio in Premiere Pro. So if you prefer doing audio in Premiere Pro, that's totally fine. You would just export it before bringing the audio in and do this in Premiere Pro. I'm just saving a step for those of you who don't want to deal with a third program for this project. So I'm opening up the options for my audio layer. I'm opening this up and see audio levels. There's like this little stopwatch, and that's how you start adding keyframes. So I have my time marker at the beginning. I'm pressing the stopwatch and it turns blue, and now we can see we have more options. So it automatically gives me 1 keyframe, and I'm gonna just click on here and I'm just gonna lower it. And then I'm gonna add another keyframe by clicking on, here's the keyframe right here. It's this little diamond shape. And then here I'm gonna do 0 because I want it to be at the actual level. And then I'm going to do another keyframe just by clicking here on the diamond shape, and I'm going to keep that at 0 because between this keyframe and this keyframe I want them to be the same. And then I'm going to come to the end and do a 4th keyframe, and you can type in the number or you can just click and drag. I think it was -30 something. So then it gives us a fade in, and you can do a slower fade out. You can adjust this by just moving the keyframes like this and make it really however you want. So you can make it fade slowly, quickly. I think this, just having a little bit of fade in here makes it more professional, makes it look great, or sound great. So you just need 4 keyframes and to adjust the audio levels there. Okay, so if you decide to bring it into Premiere Pro, you know how to export from there, but exporting from After Effects is a little bit different. So we're gonna go to File, Export, Add to Media Encoder Queue. So Adobe Media Encoder, it's gonna open up like a new window, a new program. If your computer is crashing, sometimes it's good to open this program up first. So it shows up in a list. You could have a whole list of stuff you're getting. You can create a queue of things you're going to export. So yours might not say H.264, that's the MP4 file type, but that's okay. We're gonna adjust all the settings anyway. So you can just click on any of these blue words, just click on them and you're gonna get your options opening up. Okay, so these export settings open up. So the format, you want to pick H.264, that is the MP4 format. Then in the output name, you want to make sure to click on that and save it to the right folder. Like right now, it's not saved where I want it to save. So you want to make sure to save it to the actual folder, create a folder in the M drive, the right place. And you can see that it's MP4 and you can name it here. So make sure that looks good. Press save. And then you can see here in the summary, you can see where the output is, so where it's being sent to. The only other thing you want to check is you want to increase the bit rate so that it looks better, sounds better. So make this 25 and then both will be 25. So that would be my one suggestion. If you have other settings that you know about that you want to change, you can go ahead and do that too. But those are the most important ones. Then you press OK and nothing happens because you have to press the play button to start the actual export from happening. So this is a step a lot of people forget. So the thing we did just now with this is just setting the settings. And then you have to actually press this green play button for it to happen. And then you'll see down here that it's exporting and rendering out. And then it should be saved. This render is a lot quicker than the ones in Lightwave. So it should save pretty quickly. And that's it. Have fun.